Hi, hello there, Section 14. Good to be making another video for you, your last one for this week. And it's still early March. A question has come up that I just was talking to one of you about, Sydney, I think. Staples does not have a spring, this is business notey stuff. Staples, your sister class, does not have a spring break this year. So now it's kind of up to my dean to decide. Somebody there said, hey, you don't have to teach, you'll be on break. But that's a dean thing, right? Because that's a very different situation. Why am I even talking about this? It's my problem, no one else's. I got to try to keep these classes in sync. And if I have class there and you're on break, because the college is on break, that throws me for a little bit of a loop. And I will figure that out. I have a master's degree. And anyway, good to be getting going again. I would like to, among other things today, I'd like to name a poet that's very close to me. It's probably a poet that I know better than any other in America, and we go back a long ways. And that poet's name is Jeff Johnson. Now, I'm not pranking you. I'm just being a little bit satirical, but I want to share a poem that I wrote. And it'll deserve a little bit of setup. And there's a story there that I hope will inspire you to make contributions to our Bent Pine magazine. And I'll tell you the quick story of Bent Pine in a minute. There's a deadline coming up. And I hope you realize that you've got an opportunity there to share some of your art, some of your writing. So when I get done reading that poem, which is a little bit more serious than my intro today, I would like to tell a story, like I told you. It was a companion story to the one that I told you yesterday, in which I really did something wrong at the age of 18. I enlisted a non-essential that was pretty destructive, and yeah, it made a lot of people laugh, but I should not have done that. And I've already put before you the idea that there's right rhetoric, there's wrong rhetoric, and I think there's kind of a delightful, ambiguous realm in between called gray rhetoric, where you can look at it and go, wow, is that a way to behave? Is that ethical? And I know you all know that ethics is a study of right and wrong. Then I want to talk to you about a plan that I have for our football program at Central Lakes College. And I might have a surprise. Maybe I've mentioned it. Maybe I've brought it up. I may as well just make it clear right now. I want to destroy the football program. I want to eliminate it. I want to walk to the middle of the football field, a middle-aged man in a cardigan with a couple of poetry books in my hands, and I want to say to the entire football team, come at me, bros. And that is going to happen this spring. There's a reason I would bring that up. It's an argumentation, lesson, demonstration. I'll say it now, if you don't have a topic that's arguable, if you don't have a topic that has a contra, a flip, a mirror, it's going to be hard for the project to work. And I hope this sounds like a day for you. I say a lot. I'm well aware of that. I have a wonderful colleague at Central Lakes College named Brandy Lindquist, who's an actual writing teacher. Unlike me, I'm a fraud. I'm a literature person, just kind of faking my way through a writing class. Although I know a thing or two about it, I think we would agree. But we got a couple of people on the staff, the faculty in the English department, the most talented English department in the entire state of Minnesota. If there's a weak link, it's me. We're all pretty serious people with different niches, so to speak. But I look to Leanne Flynn and Brandy Lindquist as the people that take composition most seriously. Adam Marcotte's probably we're all in there. I'm probably last in line. But Brandy Lindquist, she has it on her SIG, her email SIG. It says writing instructor. I would never put that in my little SIG down low in email. Excuse me. And what Brandy Lindquist did on a sabbatical not too long ago was she spent an entire year studying literary arts magazines across the country. And I'm so proud to be her friend, and I am so proud of what she's accomplished. She's created a first-rate, award-winning literary arts magazine called Bent Pine, or to put it another way, brought it back to life, because we had Bent Pine decades ago at the college, back when CLC was called Brainerd Community College. I remember those days. I was a kid. And I'll get you the deadline. It's coming up. It is coming up. It's in a week and a half, I think, or so. But what I want you to know, I'm inviting you. If you have any artwork that you've ever done, if you've ever painted anything, if you've taken a photograph that you admire, that you're happy with, if you've got any poetry or essays or short stories or even essay-lets, take a shot, go on the CLC webpage. I'll send you the link, or you can find it yourself. Go to Ben Pine, read about the magazine, read what the submission rules are, and try to find the courage to submit something. And it would be really neat. Of course, I'm so self-absorbed that I want the whole magazine to be full of art and literature and stuff that are my students. That would be my dream, Ben Pine, and I realize how ridiculous that is. A few years ago, I wrote a poem for it. I'll make one other editorial remark too. Inevitably, when I pick up a poet, they ask me if I make poems. And I often say, not really. Or I'll make the stupid joke. I'm a poet chauffeur. I remember Peter Balakian saying to me that he had never seen anyone as immersed in poetry as me who didn't produce poems. And I remember Kava Akbar, maybe I've told you this. He looked at me hard when I told him I really didn't write very much poetry. And he said, it's not about publication. You shouldn't let the fear of failing at the thing you love most on earth stop you from participating in it. And I wrote a Lenten poem, it could be said. And that's Lent, so I hope you don't find it too inappropriate. And if you're a person of faith, maybe you'll appreciate it. And if you're not, maybe you'll appreciate it for different reasons. It deserves a little bit of background. When Christ was crucified, he was crucified with two common thieves. And we kind of imagine their names being Gestus and Dismas, or the good thief and the bad thief. And maybe you know this, when they got 10 minutes to live, the bad thief turns to Jesus and he's like, could you just get us out of here, man? And the good thief rebukes him and says, look, this guy's innocent. We're not. We're getting what we deserve, unlike him. And then he turns to Jesus and says, would you remember me when you come into your kingdom? And Jesus is taking his last breaths. He turns and says, this day you're going to be with me in paradise. I love this story so much because the guy's saved last minute. He turns towards the light and the light towards him. And it could be just a mythological story. I can't prove that happened. A couple small things. Maybe you know that crucifixion was a death by suffocation. You were hanging there, right? And you had to lift yourself up and draw the breaths, and eventually you're not able to do that anymore. You suffocate. You might know too that when the soldiers, in those days, the Roman soldiers got bored, they often broke the legs of those that they were crucifying because it sped things along. Although it was prophesied 3 times in the Gospels, the Old Testament, that would not happen to the Lamb. And that came true. And here's something almost nobody knows. Almost no one knows this. In his entire life, Jesus never heard anyone say his name. They didn't dare. They called him rabbi or teacher or master. And here's my poem. And it'll be the only poem I'll ever read you. Of mine, anyway. Dismas saw. In one version of the story, the apostles, except for John, all ran. I was going to say like hell, when the hammering began, and they could smell the blood beneath the darkening, churning clouds. In a book I've lost, I once read another version in which Dismas, while hearing the sounds of Gestus the impenitent screaming, and Jesus just trying to catch his breath, saw them running toward something, running bravely to the points of intersection their teacher had already illuminated for them. Dismas saw Paul watching Stephen, who testified before the Sanhedrin. He saw the first flung stone that nudged him to sleep under a sky that was blue, without clouds. Dismas saw the world turned upside down, as Peter did, crucified, feet pointed towards heaven, while the pouring rain soaked his beard. He saw the head of Paul, saw in the dust of Calvary the club for Jude, the knife for Thomas, and saw the wind blowing on the footprints of Bartholomew in Armenia. As the earthquake began, the good thief Dismas, running nowhere with his broken legs, saw before he closed his eyes an opportunity reserved only for him. For everyone else in the story, he was teacher, rabbi, master. But for Dismas, the end of all desires was to breathe Yeshua. And he did. Again, and then again. Nothing else to say about that. Other than great rhetoricians, whether it's Cicero, Jesus, Martin Luther King, Thomas Merton, I may have said this already. They all talked themselves to death because they couldn't stop telling the truth. It's a way to get killed. Does this help with the light or no? No. Anyway, let me tell you a story, and then we will call it a week. A story and then an idea. I told you yesterday, repeat, I told you a story about a non-essential that I pulled the trigger on years ago, an Aristotelian non-essential that raised all sorts of heck. And here's a different example, a little further on up the line. And I'll show you a little picture of my house here. This is my favorite place in the world, my dream home. It can make it look like I'm wealthy, but I'm not. I love my little house. It's only 28 square, and then we added a guest house, and as you already know, and a glass porch later to raise our family of 2 boys. And fun fact: when I built this house, I was so dumb that I decided I would contract it myself. I don't know if you know that, but contractors hire all the guys or all the people that are going to build the house. So I was so foolish that I told myself, this will be easy for an English major. I will pick out the plumbers, the electricians, the excavator, the carpenters, everybody. I will pick everybody out, the well digger, etc. And thank goodness I had these 3 sweet carpenters that just looked after me. Every choice I made was good except for the plumbers, but cheapers crapes. I was just swimming in paperwork. And there was a point, here's the story. There was a point where I needed a guy to come out and do what's called a perk test. This is completely unnecessary information, unless you're going to live in the country someday. Perk test is pretty important. What happens is a stout-hearted dude with matted hair comes out in his pickup truck, gets out, gets on your land, takes a shovel and digs a couple of spades out of the earth. Then he pours a gallon of water in it, and then he sits in his pickup truck and listens to country music and stares at his watch and waits for the water to disappear. You want the water to disappear quickly because that will ensure that you'll be able to get a standard septic system. If it sits there for a while, it means you're going to get a mound system and you're going to be adding zeros to the checks because mound systems are very expensive. And this guy just kept telling me, I kept calling him in the spring. Oh, yeah, Jeff, I'll get out there before the snow flies. Don't worry. And he kept not getting out here. And in the process, I'm trying to get all this work done, right? And I got this. I had an experience. I went to environmental services, right? And I had everything. I had this pile of paper, just all kinds of things everybody had signed off on the project for my dream space. But I didn't have that perk test. And that's why I was calling the guy. So this sweetheart named Ed, everybody in the story is dead except me. Ed pushed the stuff across the table. This is 28 years ago. And he said, Jeff, I cannot give you your county building permit until you have the perk test. It's great that you got your township building permit, but that's not enough. So then when I got home, I got this call from this guy named Mark Saldana out of Rice, Minnesota, who is still pouring solid concrete walls. Another free piece of advice that has nothing to do with English: do not build a house with a foundation made out of cinder block. Don't. It's junk. Have somebody come in and set up forms and pour a solid concrete wall. 8 inches is good, 10 inches would be even better. It will feel like a castle and your basement will be dry with 0 radon. Don't cut that corner. Don't. You mustn't. You must not. No concrete block. My concrete guy called and he's like, Jeff, if I don't get in there in the next week or so, I'm not going to be in there till the fall. I'm too heavily scheduled. And I panicked. Because I wanted to work all summer with the carpenters. Not building because I'm not handy, but I wanted to carry boards, mark boards, do anything I could to clean up the site at the end of the day. Otherwise you pay your carpenters to do it. And I thought I would save myself money. And then I did again something I should not have. I called up my excavator, Jeff Lang in Avon, who's still my excavator, and I said, Jeff, it's time to come dig a hole. Come dig that hole. it's marked off. The county's approved it. We got to get those walls poured. And he asked me point blank, okay, Jeff, do you have both your building permits? I lied a little bit. I fibbed because I was on the verge of getting one. So I said, yep, all is well, Jeff. Come on out. So he came out and he dug the hole, and then Mark Saldana came for a few days, and all of his dudes poured these unbelievable walls that my house is still sitting on. They'll be there for centuries, I hope. And shortly after this, Ed at Environmental Services left a little note on the trusses, my roof trusses on the front. Every day I came to see what the progress was. And the note said, it was very simple, Jeff, exclamation point, call me at Environmental Services immediately. Another exclamation point, and then the number. And I called him up, and he wasn't mad at me, but he was a little bit grumpy. He's like, Jeff, what have you done out there? I'm like, what are you talking about, Ed? He said, Jeff, you dug a hole. You poured walls. And I don't know what I thought I was going to get away with. I mean, you can see my house from County Road 9 across the lake, 3/4 of a mile away. All Ed had to do was drive by. He didn't even have to come back here. So I said, okay, Ed, I'm sorry. Yes, I did that, but here's why. And I laid out the reasons just as I gave them to you. And then I said, Ed, it doesn't matter. Everything's fine. I've got my perk test now. You'll be able to give me a building permit. So he said, okay, listen, you come in with that perk test and all your rest of your gear. I'll give you your permit, but you better bring your checkbook too. Does that sound good? No. So I get in there, and Ed was pretty sorry to report to me that if I wanted my building permit, I was also going to have to write a check for $500 to cover what his boss, Don Adams, wanted to hook me up with, which is an after-the-fact building permit violation fee. Get it? I write the check, I get the deal. I'm like, oh, Ed, that's a lot of money. That's a toilet, right? Or like a pretty nice toilet. So I gave it to him, and then I wrote out the check, and then I said, okay, Ed, right now, retroactively, I want to talk my way out of this. He laughed. He said, no one has ever in the history of the county talked their way out of an after-the-fact building permit. It's never happened. It's not going to work. I said, okay, Ed, if I were to try to talk my way out of that, who would I talk to, and what would be the method? I love the word method, right? Met means along in Greek, and Hod, H-O-D, means road. So when you're asking, what's the method? I love that word. It means what's the path? What's the way? He said, okay, listen, it's not gonna work, but if you wanna try it, I'll put you on schedule. At the end of the month, you can talk to the Stearns County Board of Commissioners and make your case. In Plato's Phaedrus, Socrates makes it very clear that if you are going to be successful in making a public argument, you need to understand the nature of the souls to whom you're appealing in terms of ethos, pathos, logos, invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. And I knew that I was going to be making an argument to 5 or 6 retired senior citizens, all wearing flannel from central Minnesota. And I went for it. I also set up a bet with my AP English class. I told them the whole story I've just told you. And I said, I bet you that I'm going to get at least $250 back when I make my argument. And they're like, okay, you're on. What's the wager? And I said, if I get $250 back, you all have to chip in and buy me a super nice lunch. And if I fail, these are the stakes. I'll buy this entire class lunch. And that would have been an expensive day. So I go in, I click on the microphone, and I got senior citizens up there, and they're swiveling, right? They're above me too. There's about 80 people behind me waiting to make their rhetorical appeals. When it came my turn, I sat down, I clicked on the microphone. I also had a tape recorder because I needed to prove to AP English what I was going to try to do at least. And they were like, okay, Mr. Johnson, you started building a house without a building permit. We hear you want out of the fine. What would you like to say about this? I clicked on the little microphone, and I started talking to them. I said, okay, look, I did this. It's a rhetorical moment, right? This is action. This is rhetoric is action, real life rhetoric. I said I did this. I did start building a house without a permit, but here I had reasons. And I also said to them, so I admitted up front, and I also said, you guys, I wasn't trying to build a secret house. I've been working with the county for months on this project. You measured off the setback from the lake and from the wetlands. I've gone through every possible hoop. I wasn't trying to do anything secretive. I just lacked a perk test. I can't remember everything that I said. I only probably talked for a couple of minutes. And then I went for the non-essential. I pushed this button, and you decide, we're not going to be able to have a conversation about it, but you decide whether or not this was ethical. I looked at him hard when I got near the end of my speech, and I put my hands over my heart, because gestures are very important in rhetoric. Put my hands over my heart, and I ended with this quick little speech, and I looked him in the eye, and I said, listen, Colin, I'm a Catholic school teacher. And while I do believe I should be fined some amount of money for starting up a house without the official building permit, I also believe that $500 is an egregious amount of money for my little family to have taken from it. And that was it. I played them like a pinball machine. Instantly, this guy said, I make a motion right now that we keep $99 of Jeff's money and give him back $401 this week. And this guy named Frank Colhorse was so pissed off that by this and roused by my speech, he took the Lord's name in vain. He said, my motion is this. I make a motion that we give Jeff Johnson all of his money back and then pay him another $500 for having to come in here and argue this God-blank case. This is ridiculous, he proclaimed. And I'm like, okay, this is sounding good, but there was parliamentary procedure, confusion, right? There was a motion piled upon a motion. Pretty quickly, they sorted it out and banged the gavel, and I did get, indeed, $401 back. And that whole moment ended. This is as far as we're going to take it today, because I'm not going to take this too far past the 20-minute mark. We'll talk about the football team next time. Look what I did. Was that ethical? Was that unethical? Was I lying? No. I could say that I have a little family, right? Because I only have 2 sons, but doesn't it almost conjure the image of me gathering my wife and sons around me with like dark skies and tumbleweeds going by? It worked. Not one of them were able to say, they had no rhetorical training, so not one of those senior citizens, flannel shirts, could say, you're Catholic? Who cares? But I knew that half of them were going to be Catholics or the other half sympathetic Lutherans. It's Stearns County. Someone should have said, that's an Aristotelian non-essential. And by the way, yeah, you may not make a lot of money as a Catholic school teacher, but your wife's a med-surg nurse and you're building a lake home on 20 acres. You're fine. You could argue about that. I would call that gray. I would call that kind of an ambiguous rhetorical moment. And Ed followed me out into the hallway. And his boss was angry because I set history in Stearns County, and Ed had to sneak out in the hallway and throw his arms around me and hug me. He died a little while later of ALS, not too many years after that, and that's a sad story. But I know I'll see him again. We'll all see each other again. I hope in heaven. We're going to wrap it up for the week. I'm at 23 minutes. We're not going to take this a second longer. Thanks for putting up with me and all my storytelling. I hope there's lessons for you here somewhere. Love you.